Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm Joe with Tabletop Theory, and today is the first episode of sort of an as yet unnamed podcast sort of format thing that I wanted to start doing with people that are doing things with tabletop role-playing games and other types of games, and sort of interlacing them with therapeutics, with mental health work and social work and all other kinds of really beneficial things, because like I've talked about in the past, there's all kinds of really interesting ways to bring these types of ideas together. So today I wanted to sit down with Peter Jung, who's Roll for Kindness on Twitter, and have a conversation about the type of work that he's doing. Thanks for being here today, Peter. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And so we were talking before the show that one of the things that we've sort of been learning about is this idea that there's just so many people who are working on this whole intersection of mental health work and role-playing games. So where did you start to see the comparative sort of like combinations that can go from like mental health work and like role-playing games? When did you start to really make those connections?
So there's actually two kind of formative experiences. The first was my own. In high school, I had a pretty awful high school experience, and playing D&D with my friends, who are still my friends, gave me, a sense of connection, a sense of, something to look forward to. And it really, just having that, okay, life sucks, but once a week, I'm going to be able to stay up with my friends till 3 a.m. killing skeletons and orcs. That was a reason just to get through it. And so I've always kind of felt that there's some intrinsic purpose that D&D can give you, whether that is just a distraction or a way for you to project your feelings. It's just a very versatile tool that I started kind of playing around with and experiencing at a pretty early age. And then kind of before I jumped into the whole kind of professional social skills DM stuff, I was working as a foster care worker, and I was running these kind of pickup games at my friendly local gaming store. And the owner found out that I had a had a career in foster care at the time, and he started telling all his foster care parent friends. So suddenly, like, there'd be an adult and 2 kids coming to the game, and another adult and 2 kids coming to the game. So it'd be like 6-7 players with a bunch of kids and a handful of adults. And I didn't think too much of it. And then afterwards, the parents would start coming to me and would just say, hey, this kid barely engages with us. He barely talks. He's been bouncing around homes a lot. It's been really rough. And the way I saw him light up, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
This is amazing. When can you do it again? And so that was kind of the moment where I was like, okay, there's definitely something to this. And I think that was in 2008, 2009 when I was doing that. And then I got hired on with Aspiring Youth, and I've been with them ever since for about 7 years.
You mentioned sort of like the whole social skills DM thing, and that's on your Twitter bio. So like, what is a social skills DM? So
the way I do it is kids come in from Aspiring Youth, and they're not therapy groups, they're social skills groups. So I do not go in there with a sort of therapeutic approach. I go in with a more skills-oriented approach. So we're going to be using the game to practice things like, conversation, taking turns, perspective taking, just various based on what the kids' emergent or predefined needs are. We kind of incorporate that into the game. So say there is a youth that has a hard time just talking, is just very quiet, very afraid to speak up. I might have a sequence where his character gets separated from the rest of the party, and they have to ask for directions to get back.
Oh, that's clever.
Yeah, or a kid that maybe struggles with some self-esteem, I might challenge to say, let's try playing an orcish, like a half-orc barbarian, a very high charisma, very proud and strong, and let's
Yeah,
see if you
very
can
out there kind
practice
of
role play.
character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just various things like that. And then there's a lot of things that occur more passively, I've been noticing, with the kids supporting each other. And so I think a lot of it comes down to having a really intentionally designed space where kids feel comfortable to help each other learn social skills.
Okay.
So it's not so much that I'm teaching them, I'm just creating a setting where those social skills can be practiced.
Got it. So,
And
go
there's
ahead. Yeah.
incentive.
Yeah. What do you mean by incentive? I'm curious about that.
A lot of the kids I see have been to a lot of pre-existing social skills groups or whatever,
I
and
see. I see.
they can't stand him. Whereas this one, like, okay, well, if you can talk your way out of this scenario, the guards won't take you to prison.
Right.
That's some incentive to really try
Right.
to get these guards to let the fact that the rogue has been pickpocketing everyone in the village,
Right.
which happened last night. It's gonna be fun to and a bunch of wild magic surges. So the kids are gonna
Oh,
be
those are always fun.
experiencing. There's gonna be a lot. Yeah, the kids are actually in quite a bit of trouble, and I'm excited about them having a lot of opportunities to talk their way out of it, because one of the people they ticked off was an arch wizard.
Ah, powerful enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm curious. You're talking about the idea of like, giving your players sort of a chance to sort of move outside the comfort zone. And you mentioned like you have a player who might be dealing with a little bit of self-confidence. So putting them into something like a half-orc barbarian is going to sort of push them a little bit. I found something similar in the groups that I've run, but I'm curious, how do you sort of balance that level of challenge and support between like knowing how you feel like your players could be dealing with sort of like something like you're saying, they're there to do social skills work, right? It's like a skills based approach. But how do you as a DM sort of give your players the chance to sort of move in a direction that you feel like might be beneficial for them from like a social skills perspective, but not maybe go that extra level that might be too far to push them to a place where they might start to feel uncomfortable? How do you gauge that?
Kind of, you just assess it in the moment.
Yeah.
There have been situations where you could tell that they're really struggling, and then you just wind it back. Or what I really like to do is see if other youth can kind of step in and help, because you want to push them, and if they can't do it alone, you kind of have to create a space where another youth can, at their level, bring them up. Yeah. Because that teaches them kind of two lessons. First off, they're learning that social skill from someone else who probably has been in a similar place. But they also kind of get a very valuable lesson in that, they're not alone in this.
And then it gives the other player the opportunity to help learn how to provide that sort of supportive language and coaching and help. That's a really cool method.
So much of that lately.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, the kids are so good to each other. I know you're gonna ask a question about how the pandemic has changed. So
we could talk about it. I mean,
okay, let's just
the question is basically like, you've been running these games since before COVID-19 sort of changed how everybody did things, right? So when it happened, when COVID sort of forced everybody to move their in-person stuff online, what did you do? Like, how did it change for you?
So we were doing in-person groups, and this was last March or February, and we were just kind of talking about COVID, and I said, look, we're gonna have to move this thing online. How are we gonna do it? And the kids were all like, Discord. So I created a Discord server, and that's created a space for the kids to interact offline. So they're talking constantly. Just it's created this space where they can just really dive into it. I created an in-character channel where they can role play together, and sometimes I'll pop in as an NPC and just
Love that.
drive the conversation. But what I've been seeing is, aside from this group of kids I refer to as the mad scientists, writing pages and pages of equations that prove that, according to this spell, which releases this many kilocalories of energy, combined with this level 3 spell, we could destroy a planet with 2 level 3 spells.
Yeah, you were saying before we started recording, you had a player create like a whole text of calculations for how many spells could stop the core of the Earth from spinning or something like that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
This is it's either hard calculus and
Wow.
this comes for like 15-year-olds who are just really, really bright.
Yeah.
Or puns, because I hate puns and they know I hate puns. So
what are some of the best ones they've come up with?
I have,
just to put you on the spot.
No, I have actually scrubbed them from my brain.
Oh man.
I actually reinforce it though.
Okay.
There's a system where I have angry cat emojis, and they're playing a game of blackjack. So the most angry cat is a 5, and the annoyed cat is a 1. And so they make puns, and they're trying for 21. And if they get 21, they get a reward in game.
Nice.
So they are incentivized to torture me. And it's become this wonderful shared goal where there's this amazing relationship that I've been able to build with the kids, where we're very mutually antagonistic, but in a very excited to see how much we can screw with each other's plans or screw with each other's characters. And that's created a very cool space. But in the meantime, the other thing that I've been seeing is, as the kids interact when we're not doing groups, they're really helping each other with the rules, helping each other with all kinds of stuff, homework, or, hey, does anyone want this random thing, or can I drop this off? I need to get rid of this.
So it's sort of building community.
Yeah. And, I recently saw the kids talking about bad experiences with teachers and kind of really borderline abusive things that teachers had done.
Wow.
And the kids just all coming together and supporting each other and saying, okay, this is what I did. This is how I got my parents involved, and put it into it.
That's really powerful. Jeez.
And that was really instrumental, because then I kind of stopped thinking about this group as something that is solely about social skills, but keeping the idea that, as someone who is autistic, self-advocacy is a key social skill.
Right.
Taking away from the idea that we should just be teaching neurotypical social skills, but creating a space where autistic skills and self-advocacy can be explored. And, these are just things that happen kind of organically, of the kids supporting each other and being very kind to each other, and, sharing in their frustrations, but also giving each other advice. Saying things like, oh yeah, I do that too, and here's what works for me. And it's been magical to see. I think the switch to Discord, where the kids can really organically build kind of unstructured friendships, where they're not constantly trying to mask, and are comfortable with each other and can be themselves and show affection for each other by writing 3 pages of equations. That's something magical. So I've been able to witness this, and it has just filled me with such joy.
That's really cool. So sort of asking a different question about the groups. Are you playing primarily like Dungeons and Dragons, or are there the systems that you've created?
What I'm playing is Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
aside from the kids that their entire purpose is to create wild magic surges, there are very few.
Yeah. I have a player
You-
in one of my campaigns right now that he's gone through a couple of different wild magic surges, and what ended up happening at one point within like the period of one session, his character became 11 years old, lost all of their hair, and then was immediately transported to a different plane, which I then described the Zoom meeting that we were all playing in from the character's point of view, and then blipped him back to his body. Magic surges can create some really fun accidents in game.
This is a homebrew magic surge system,
Okay.
so it's even more esoteric.
Love it.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, so very little rules
Mm-hmm.
stuff unless the kids are engaging on that front. A lot of it's just improvisational role playing.
Sure.
As for the games that I've created, a lot of them have been inspired by what I've done with this group and what's been successful with this group. So the system I made for the Caravan Endures
Mm-hmm.
was actually a system that I used for one of my most challenging quarters, where I think there were like 11 kids in the group. So it was a
Wow.
really big group. And so I was reading like first edition rules and saw that, okay, after a while you inherit a castle, or you know
Right.
you get a castle or whatever. So I
The
had them
whole
inherit a castle.
stronghold thing.
Yeah. And they would have to choose what sort of things they spend each day doing,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of work together to be like, okay, so you and I should go patrol the forest. And so that created opportunities for smaller scale role playing, rather than it being this kind of free for all where voices are going to get drowned out.
Right.
And then in the evening, after they had gone and done things, they would have a meeting and some news would happen. So there was an assassin in the castle,
Wow.
and one by one, it was targeting the NPCs that they had hired to run the castle. Which, hiring NPCs is another really good collaborative exercise. But if they made a bunch of really good decisions,
Mm-hmm.
one of the NPCs might discover a trap. But if they had been kind of goofing off, I'd say like, yeah, so and so walks in and they're holding, this person and they're bleeding out, and the kids are just like, oh no, we really got to work on this.
So the quality of the NPCs is sort of based on how well the players sort of rolled or paid attention or role played through the situations. If I'm
Um,
understanding.
it's the safety of the NPCs and the safety of the castle.
Okay, I see.
So if the kids got news that, hey, the assassin's starting to put little poison needle traps all over the castle, if they decide, hey, let's go, get drunk and party or something,
Mm-hmm.
I would just be like, okay, so that night, two of the NPCs, poke their fingers and die. Whereas if they work together and we're like, okay, so we want us to reinforce guard duty. I want these people to be using, detect
I see.
whatever. And so they were able to actually shut it down. They were going up against this assassin, and it was this really weird character that was obsessed with traps and kind of real weird ways to target people.
Mm.
But they did a lot of really good teamwork, and when it was the final fight, they literally one-shotted the assassin.
Nice.
And I remember I was just like, man, this is big. This is climax of this whole thing. The assassin shows their face, and then they critted and one-shotted it. I'm just like,
that like as a game master, I simultaneously feel like happy for my players and super frustrated whenever that happens, because you put so much effort into creating like this perfect villain, and then they're just like, boop, dead.
done. Yeah. And but the cool thing was it was teamwork at its finest.
Yeah.
So hold person, do this, buff,
Yep.
attack,
Yeah.
and it's an advantage, and there's extra. It was beautiful.
That's awesome. It's always good to see that.
Yeah, it's a little sad when I have this whole monologue planned, and it's
Oh
just
no.
like, nope, Nope. They're just like, you've been messing with our castle.
It's
Just
time to
die.
go.
So yeah,
Oh, that's rough.
it was a lot of fun. And only
Yeah.
one NPC died, and then my co-facilitator brought him back,
Okay.
um, because he was a NPC who was a chaos warlock, so he's constantly shifting around and changing his appearance. So he went from being dead to almost dead. And my co-facilitator is actually a former student of mine who graduated, and then I hired her on to help me run the groups. And so it's almost kind of like a peer therapist model,
Oh, okay,
um,
sure.
where she's been in these groups and she knows what it's like to be on the other side. And um, she does a lot of observation, and she picks up on things and talks with the kids and kind of just acts as my backup. And it's created a very cool space where she can point out things that I may not be picking up on,
Mm-hmm.
and I really think there's some value. And I my day job, I work for a wraparound agency, and we use a lot of peer counselors.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that the peer model is one of the most important models in mental health right now,
Yeah.
because it lowers barriers, it has that lived experience, and it helps people feel really comfortable with it. And I think she does a very good job on that front. So, um,
So your co-facilitator, if you're basically in the middle of a session, are they sort of like role playing along with you, almost like a collaborating game master, or is this sort of like the discussions that you're talking about, things that you might have missed? Are those things being brought up after the session, or it almost kind of sounds like you run your sessions? I don't want to say non-linearly, but that's not the right word. But like you're sort of allowing the sessions, at least on Discord, to happen over a longer period of time.
so we have our kind of in-person session, which is through a Discord chat, and then we
Okay.
have kind of stuff happening throughout the week. And my co-facilitator will just DM me if I'm
Okay.
missing something.
I
And
gotcha.
that's so when we're doing it in person, we actually have an XP whiteboard where raising your hand, supporting each other, that will net you positive XP.
Okay.
Whereas speaking over someone or saying something inappropriate, that will net you negative XP. And the kids, when they want a power level, they just game that so much. But that's fine.
That's awesome.
Um, but it helps the kids learn to just be aware of when other people are speaking and to be respectful of that and sensitive around that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a nice visual indicator there. So usually, if she's DMing, I'm on the whiteboard. If I'm
Okay.
DMing, she's on the whiteboard.
So
Um,
those sort of things, that almost sounds like sort of a version of like creating group norms or like almost an informed consent documentation. I know that when I was doing group counseling intern work at a drug rehab center, one of the things that happened with group therapy was the idea that the group norms in sort of every so often, because it was sort of a rotating client basis, had to be refreshed, and it was sort of done with the group as sort of like a collaboration of like, these are the group norms that we've established to be acceptable and what is and is not okay. Is that kind of how that worked out, or did you sort of create that for them? I'm curious about that.
um, the whiteboard idea was Rafael Bocamasso's idea.
Okay.
He was my initial co-facilitator, or he was the initial facilitator. He brought me in as a co-facilitator, then he moved on, and then I'm the primary facilitator. So that was kind of his idea. We do have group rules, and a lot of them are just kind of no inappropriate language at the
Sure,
table,
sure.
um, you know, everyone supporting each other, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've had to implement specific things just to make things work. So we have a hand system where kids will put a hand emoji in the chat
Okay.
if it's a busy scene, and I'll just say, okay, way too many people talking right now. Everyone use hands, and so people will
Okay.
type hand in the or do a hand emoji in the chat, and I'm like, okay, you go first. Okay, you go first. So that kind of creates a space to keep people from really all talking at once and it turning into an issue. But one of the challenges with Discord is sometimes someone will say something and you can't see them because I have like 10 people in my group, so I don't have the so I don't have the cameras on, and so I won't know if they're just kind of pausing to say the rest of their thing. So sometimes there's a few of them that will occasionally need a little while to formulate something.
Sure.
So they'll say, okay, I stepped down from the ladder. Okay, so you stepped down. I wasn't done. I was just like, oh,
Oh yeah.
Okay, please go.
Yeah.
So that's.
So with those groups, have they been consistently sort of text-based, like almost play-by-post on Discord, or did they ever meet in person prior to sort of the lockdown?
Oh yeah, this is a long-running group.
Okay.
I've been running the same group for like 7 years.
Wow.
Same world.
That's awesome.
Our retention rate is, it's retention
good or retention bad?
Retention awesome.
Yeah.
Kids will not leave this group. And like here's a kid that was in my group when we started, and she's my co-facilitator now.
Yeah,
she's still with us.
They're sticking around.
They're sticking around. There's this huge wait list. It's a good thing because I've been able to see a real impressive kind of can't speak longitudinal view of how these kids have grown over time.
Sure.
I've run a lot of kind of short, 1 quarter long D&D social skills groups on the side that have given me a lot of experience in various different modalities. So I've run one that was more of like a family therapy group. I ran a girls group. I just finished an educational marine science RPG group.
Cool.
Yeah. That was actually a collaboration with another company that's designing something with someone from the Seattle Aquarium.
So it's like marine biology based.
Yep.
That's cool.
And so I was kind of the one of the facilitators, and the other guy DM'd it, and it was a lot of fun and an effective tool to motivate kids for learning. So that was cool to see.
So one of the things that you sort of mentioned, the Caravan Endures, but you have another product called, I don't know if it's a project is probably the better word for it, called Speaking with Monsters. It sounds fascinating, and I'm wondering if you could kind of describe it.
So I like bugs. I really like bugs. I really like animals. I have 2 cats, and I work with a lot of people who are very different with me, or different than me. I recently got into this job doing crisis work and kind of intensive in-person family therapy, where I will go into people's homes and and just this past year I have been out of my comfort zone a lot, and also just spending a lot more time in nature. And honestly, this comes largely from the amount of time I've been spending in nature, because there's nowhere to go, so I've been going hiking all the time. And just observing animals and realizing that even bugs have their own emotional states that you can detect. You can tell when an insect is afraid. You can tell when they seem content. You can tell when they're exhausted. And I started kind of thinking about how in a lot of media, there's this push to humanize the monsters, to make them lovable. And I hate that.
Okay.
And, you see it, there's the monsters that are okay to kill, and they look like giant spiders. But if you give them big googly Disney eyes, suddenly they're humanized, they can speak, they have the full human range of emotions, and they love
It's
you.
just a different method of presentation sort of denotes whether or not it's morally acceptable to commit violence against them.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of my thought is, yeah, it's still, even though this one has little beady spider eyes, it's still not okay to kill it
Right.
unless it's Shelob, and Shelob must die. But if it's not Shelob, it's, I'm probably mispronouncing that
We'll
name.
call
I've
it good.
only,
It's the whole Smaug debacle that, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um, but if it's a giant spider, it might just be chilling.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently watched the original series episode, Devil in the Dark, a Star Trek episode, where there's this kind of slime monster that is going around and killing these miners. And it turns out the miners have been accidentally destroying its eggs. And there's a scene where Spock mind melds with the creature and finds out that it's intelligent, it's sapient, it's going after the miners because they were threatening it. And at the end of the episode, the slime monster is actually helping with the mining operation.
Huh.
And that was awesome because at no point is the monster humanized. Spock kind of reads its emotions, but that's about it. Um, and I think that there is a need to practice radical empathy that a lot of people don't think about. And it's very easy to be empathic towards stuff that is familiar to you,
Mm-hmm.
but challenging yourself to be empathic towards something that is different, like fundamentally different, is good practice for thinking about and preparing yourself to not have a knee-jerk reaction when people might be from a different whatever than you.
Right.
Because I think a lot of the times we as human beings, uh, self-associate into our clans
Mm-hmm.
and us versus the other. And I think, the role of a role-playing game, when done well, is to create a space for practicing skills in a very abstract and overblown way, but eventually you'll get some trickle down.
Sure.
You may be a very shy person who plays this barbarian, badass orc who's super loud and screams all the time. Does that mean that you're going to be this screaming, 13-year-old? No, but it may help you to feel a little bit more confident. Have that practice and speaking more loudly
Mm-hmm.
and being supported in that. And kind of my drive with speaking with monsters was to love things that are, well, again, I'm a huge bug fan.
Yeah.
I do insect photography.
Okay.
And I kept honeybees for a while, and the level of, once you get outside of your human brain and things that can seem like human emotions, and you start keying into the emotions of bees, there's so much joy you can just pick up from that. And when I had a beehive, I remember I'd be working it and just hanging around the hive and realize they're happy.
Hmm.
These are happy bees.
I've never thought about it like that.
And I'm sharing their happiness with them, sitting next to the hive and watching them, come in with these very big pollen sacks or pollen buckets, and just being giddy and just sharing that simple thing. So I think that was another inspiration. But ultimately, the core idea of the game is it's a system for people coming into a monster territory and trying to understand how to communicate with the monsters. Because, and I'm intentionally leaving a blank template for people to design their own monsters.
Okay.
But the ones I have designed are a slime, a fungus, and spiders. And so very non-human. So people have to think about, okay, how can I create my own web so the spiders can start tapping on that and doing that? Or with the fungus people, how can I control what scents I'm releasing? Because they're all about spores and
Yeah.
picking up spore scents.
So it's the idea of pushing players to sort of think about how things that, like you say, aren't humanized or anthropomorphized or made to look non-threatening can be dealt with in a similar way to something that, like, you might look at and be like, oh, okay, that's clearly meant not to be something that I don't want to attack. It's like, when you were talking, I was thinking about the dragon in the first Shrek movie. When the dragon is first shown as a character, it's this very threatening creature, and then as soon as I don't remember what happens, but like Donkey gets tied up by it, and then the dragon tries to kiss him, but the dragon actually very physically changes in appearance in that moment. And there's a whole question about whether or not that was like a consensual relationship from the beginning, but like, you know what I mean, right? It's the
no, but so you're actually triggering a very my thoughts on a conundrum I've had with this game.
Okay.
Because my initial thing, I created a whole monster manual
Right.
for all these different monsters. And after a while, I started thinking I should add a romanceable option. And so, because I realized, you know, I could take a complete left turn with this game and turn it into a monster dating sim. And I'm still not 100% thinking that that's not a bad idea, because I know
there's
that
probably
there's
a market for that.
There is a market for it. Trust me.
It exists. It exists.
It exists, and I think that it would be a departure from my initial vision, but it might sell more.
So I mean, yeah, it's a fabulous system, but you know, money.
Yeah. Well, and I think also, you know, it's, if people want a big hunky werewolf dating sim, if that's how they want to use my game,
your car is on the lot.
Cool. Have fun. And it's a very different approach, but I think it's also kind of fun. You know, I enjoy games where you can take the rule set and go in a completely different direction. Because one key thing that I don't like about D&D is you start with this description of a world and you're rolling it. And like, okay, there's these castles and this city here and this forest and these creatures and whatnot. And you're someone in this world. You can be a priest of the faith, or a wandering scoundrel, or a student of the arcane arts. Yeah. Oh, and here's all the ways you can physically harm someone.
Combat is a huge part of the system initially. It's a war game. It was developed as a war game.
Yeah. And those roots are still very strong.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the three. It's 3 or 5. I can never remember what they have it listed as D&D Beyond. Several many pillars, like combat, social interaction, and exploration. Or no, it's combat, role playing, and exploration. That's what they are, right? So it's one of the main pillars of the game.
Yeah, and I love a combat heavy game as much as anyone else, but I find that as a social skills DM, combat can be very good for teamwork building. Because the stakes are real. Yeah. You know, if you guys don't do good teamwork, you're gonna get TPK.
Yeah, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. Which I've only done a TPK once, and it was a Willy Wonka scenario. And once the kids died, they woke up in cloning tubes.
Weird. Wait.
Okay, it's so much fun.
Hang on. Willy Wonka scenario, like, people were getting picked off periodically, or like they were in a candy?
One by one, I was killing the kids. So there is this mad scientist wizard in my world, and he made a theme park devoted to himself. And as the kids went through it, they were one by one, you know. And when the first kid like got, you know, pulled off into the void, everyone's just like, "Wait, is he dead?" And I'm just like, "Roll some dice." Yes.
Ouch.
And then I flashed him. So you wake up and you're in this glass tube. It slides open, and you don't really remember too much. You remember getting aboard the ride, trying one of those hats on, and then you don't really remember too much.
That's awesome.
So
I did something. I was a player in a game similar to that a very long time ago, where the entire party got wiped, and then we woke. It was like, I think we were playing second edition Dungeons and Dragons, and we all got killed, and we all ended up being in a level of hell, and we all had to fight our way out of hell, which like was a really cool idea because like we're all dead anyway, so of course the game can continue. But like at that point you're like, well, if you die in hell, what happens next? And fortunately none of us found out, but like, yeah, I love that idea of like what happens after your character dies. That's always an area that I've wanted to explore more as a game master. But like you said, you've only had a TPK once. I
and it was
haven't.
Intentional. No, it was something where I told the kids, FY, if some of you die tonight, that's according to plan, and don't freak
Love
out.
it.
Trust me.
Got it.
And the kids, I gave them heads up so they weren't going to be too worried.
Sure.
And you know, it turns out that yes, they were absolutely clones, and
cool.
they have a special rule not to eat cheese after midnight, because it turns out there's sort of a yes, they actually did a sort of Gremlins thing. So they found out that they turn into these Oompa Loompa characters who
that's
you know,
weird.
worked in the theme
it.
park. It's very, very strange, but they were all about like, okay, so we because the Oompa Loompa sort of characters had like actually pretty good stats. So they were always like, okay, so if we ever need a bunch of combat sport, we have a wheel of cheese and we'll all take a bunch of bites and transform. So it was also like kind of a lycanthropy, except there are these Oompa Loompa people called Wonderful Wallaces.
Cool.
Yes.
Trademark.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So the whole idea behind like speaking with monsters, it's almost like creating sort of an opportunity for non-violence, or just further developing into that whole social interaction part. Does combat ever happen, or can it even happen in that game?
There can be, but it's a skill. Combat is a skill.
Okay, so just blanket like combat is just like anything else, like sleight of hand or persuasion or something like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of meant to be more performative.
Okay.
So you showing off, you know, how much you can throw a spear, or you know, being able to best someone in a wrestling match. So again, I wanted to create a game that has that focus on, you know, trying to think about social encounters, trying to think about the goal being, let's not kill this monster, let's go be this monster's friend. Let's find out what they're looking for in a friend and if we can meet that. And it's meant to be a challenging game. You know, it's possible, it's expected that there will be a lot of bumps in the road, but it's sort of this almost passion project of mine. Like whereas Caravan Endures is very much this, you know, whole system for building teamwork on a caravan. This one was kind of inspired by looking through, well, there was this one Twitter meme going around where there's a picture of the monster manual and there's a piece of the tape over it that said boyfriend catalog. and so I started looking for it, like, okay, cool.
Monster dating sim, like you were saying.
Yeah, and so that was kind of like the initial take, and then I decided, like, okay, let's get serious. These monsters seem like they could be your friends, and let's create a game where the focus, instead of fighting the monsters stats wise, is more towards trying to, you know, understand them. But I kind of, the more I think about it, because, you know, there's mechanics for giving gifts, there's mechanics for going on little expeditions together, you can do little things for them. It actually does kind of function like a dating sim, which may be why I'm trying to get away from that.
I can see the parallel, you know, you're trying to like make a friend versus create somebody who's like a significant other. The roads can cross, at least. Yeah. No, I get it.
And, you know, it's kind of up to people who play it to determine what they do with it. And yeah, it's still very much in beta, and I finished a beta that, the more I think about it, I am terrified of playtesting because I have no idea if it's going to work or completely fall flat. But again, unlike Caravan Endures, which is very much I want to make this whole teamwork thing. This is just sort of my passion project. I want to see if it works.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, I'm not going to be too distraught.
Mm-hmm.
I've got another game, The Rafters, that I'm kind of thinking about.
So, if people wanted to learn more about either Caravan Endures, The Rafters, or several of the other projects that are as yet unnamed that you have listed on your website, where could they go to do that?
I just posted on rollforkindness.com. There's whenever I have like new public betas, I'll just make a post saying, "Hey, there's public betas."
Yeah, you sent me a copy of Speaking with Monsters, I think probably a few months ago, and I was blown away. I thought it was really cool. I love the idea.
So one thing I've had to be really sensitive about
Uh-huh.
is the idea of there being kind of a racial component, because whenever you're thinking about monstrous races, there are problems with orcs.
Yeah.
And
Sorry, my neighbor's
I
dog is
intentionally
barking like mad. Go ahead. Problems with orcs.
and I didn't. I initially made a character idea for orcs, and then I was like, nah. And so I really didn't want to create a game that could reinforce stereotypes, and I don't think I'm in a place where I know enough to author a game that is that sensitive.
Mm-hmm.
However, I know enough about spiders.
Right.
I know enough about mushrooms. I know enough about slime molds to, at least fantasy slime molds. I actually don't know much about slime molds, but
it's Jello, but it's sentient.
To just kind of come up with some cool ideas about, let's think about, something that is a monster, and how can we not show aggression to it? Something that cannot communicate with us traditionally. And how can we come to it on its level in the wild as this creature who is intelligent, but very much its own thing.
Right.
And I've also kept a lot of bugs as pets, and kind of a real significant moment was I had a praying mantis, and mantises are fun to keep as
pets. I didn't know you could keep those as pets. Not legally, but whatever. I didn't know they made pets, or they were pets.
They don't last long, unfortunately. But my favorite one, I had raised him from a nymph, so he was like this small. At the end, he was about this tall, and he, you always have to be very careful with anthropomorphizing anything.
Sure, like you were saying with the whole game model.
But what I found was he had learned he loved to watch traffic out my window, and he loved watching moving things. So I detected that he always wanted to be near a lot of movement. So I kind of had him trained to drop down from the cage and climb up my arm, and then I'd start playing Team Fortress 2.
Huh.
And I would just feel him going up, and then tap, tap, tap. I'd go like this, and he would crawl on top of my headphones and watch me play Team Fortress 2.
Wow.
And we do this like all the time. And he probably was just like, here's moving things. They release small amounts of chemicals in my brain that are interesting and keep me engaged. Yeah. But I think for his small size, that was something that was probably enjoyable to him. It made for a wonderful experience. He probably didn't think of me as anything else but a large tree. But I was a large tree that was able to give him some interesting feedback or some interesting sensory data. So, it comes down to meeting a creature where they are, and getting out of yourself as a human.
Try to put yourself on somebody else's plane, sort of experience things from someone else's point of view.
Yeah. And it's I absolutely adore insects and bugs and spiders, and if you kill spider in my home, I will throw hands. Like
Noted. Good to know.
yeah. I was just like, no, I you can put them outside. I let the cats kill them because that's them doing them.
What they
but
do, yeah.
if you're human and you know better, I will be very, very upset.
Yeah, we are very pro spider in our house. We in Texas, we every summer have like problems with flies that just show up. So like spiders are great. I love spiders. My wife actually this past Christmas got a spider Christmas ornament. I think from
Oh,
Russia, and it's this beautiful, ornate sort of. It's not real gold, but it's like gold plated thing. Found it on Etsy. It's really cool. So we are pro spider in this house. It is a big thing because they're just useful. They're awesome.
yeah.
And I remember reading it one, like it's probably not real, but the something about like spiders will get very upset if they have a mate and that mate is killed. They'll go after the creature that killed them. I don't know if it's true, but it's just another reason for me not to want to kill spiders because I don't need a spider with a grudge.
Yeah, no, it's spiders are really interesting. Just having kept as many as I have, you do start, especially with jumping spiders, um, you do start to notice that there's they have different demeanors. Like even ones that appear to be the same species, between them, because I used to keep them in little boxes. I noticed that some were very, I don't want to say sociable, but they were always kind of hopping around and would be fine with being handled and were just curious about you. And others that are just in their burrow all the time, don't want anything to do with you. Um, and so and I've heard that from like other entomologists that study spiders, is that they have their own kind of unique. They don't say personality, just like demeanors.
Sure.
Um, and so I think that's interesting and that's cool, and that just helps me have a appreciation for these amazing creatures and want to make a game
Yeah,
about
I
them.
can totally see how that experience of like multiple spiders and learning about their, you said not personalities, but like their actions and their idiosyncrasies could totally help you see that as a concept. That's awesome. I love that concept because it's just another really cool example of how role playing games can be used to sort of fit the mold to sort of address a certain issue or handle a certain topic. That's awesome. That's amazing. I never would have thought about that. Spiders being able to sort of present themselves in a way to create sort of a non-violent system for a role playing game. That's really cool.
And there is an option to romance them.
Damn if that's not just an extension of what I'm sure everybody wants out of the boyfriend manual or the girlfriend
Spider
manual
dating
or
sim.
that's wow. Well, I don't know if there's more to say about anything other than
Yeah,
that.
close on, like, yeah, there is a romanceable option with all the monsters. It's intended as a comedic
Yeah,
aspect,
yeah.
because if players are kind of trying various things and they bring a bunch of dead flies to a spider. Oh yeah, that's absolutely the beginning of courtship. So the spider is going to have some very curious ideas about what you're up to, and communicate that. But it's meant as a comedic
Sure,
thing.
yeah.
But my concern, and maybe not concern, but curiosity,
Mhm.
is that how far will people go with the the horny bard problem?
Yeah, the sort of sexualized nature of how certain games can progress. Yeah. It's the idea of, but I mean, yeah, I imagine, at least for me, talking about the groups that I run, that whole idea of is sex an option, is romance an option in a
Yeah.
game is something that I try to address before gameplay even starts. Like the groups that
Mhm.
I run for the university that I work at, that's like an explicit thing that I bring up at the beginning. It's like, I will not allow you to romance an NPC or create a romantic relationship between player characters just because like that could put me in a potentially very uncomfortable situation with a player just because like that's not something I don't need to be that's not something anybody needs to be dealing with on a professional basis. But
I'm of two minds.
okay.
Um, you know, in my primary group, yeah, I just keep romance to a bare
Mhm.
minimum, just because I don't want, uh, you know, a the kids aren't really interested in it.
It's kind of like an ethical conflict, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like a
yeah,
counselor thing because yes, I think I see where you're going. It's the idea that like you can use a role playing game as a method to sort of like unpack that idea, but also like is this the right time and place for that? And
yeah,
for what I'm doing with the university, it's not really the case. But like
yeah.
a different group of people, a different context. Yeah.
The girls group, absolutely
Okay.
romanced.
Okay.
And that was really cool to see, because there was this girl who, it was a bunch of teen girls, and there was this one girl who had a lot of social anxiety, but she was also kind of boy crazy. And And so she ended up setting up a date with one of the town guards. And it turned into like they were actually trying to stop the goblins from attacking. Like it started out as a date, and then there was a goblin attack on the city.
Mm-hmm.
And he kept on rolling ones. So she dumped him.
Aw.
Very publicly.
Aw.
And it was, and all the other girls kind of helped and were cheering her.
Oh,
and
man.
so it turned into this whole soap opera thing where he was trying to get her back and just failing. And this girl who's very shy, love social anxiety, was saying, "No, I'm just too good for you."
Nice.
And like all the other girls just backing her up. And so done right, romance was incredibly
okay.
In fairness, that was an absolutely failed romance.
Yeah, but I get your point. It's a topic that could sort of be very useful, and yeah, I stand corrected. Yes, that is fabulous.
Yeah, that was a fun campaign.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I always love the I've only done one. Technically, I've done two girls groups, but one I wasn't really involved with DMing as much. But the one girls group versus the boys dominated group, the boys they just want powerful magical items and things that will give them more
powerful weapons,
powerful tools. They want to be more powerful. Sure. Girls, I have never had to make up so many NPCs upon the fly because when they were setting up that first date, they toured every single restaurant in town.
Yeah, I could see how that would require a lot of NPCs and on-the-fly name generation. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, meanwhile, these goblins are mounting an attack, and they're like, no, this is important.
What's the signature dish here? What's your... I love that. That's awesome. I always enjoy things like that because, like, if my players are like pushing me to like describe something more about a world, it's always just like, okay, well, if this is something you really care about, I'll put effort into it because, like, it's just it gives you an opportunity to sort of flex a creative muscle that you may not have like even thought about before then.
It also means that you're succeeding.
Yes.
So long as it's hitting the goals. So I was talking with this one DM who was lamenting that one of his social skills groups spent like 3 months in the starter forest. And I was like, okay, what were they doing in the starter forest? So like, well, they're running around, causing chaos, just goofing off. I'm like, and this is a social skills group. Like, yeah. Then what's the problem?
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. And he's like, I guess so. But I want them to experience the story. It's like, that's your story.
Yeah. What's your player's story? What story are they trying to unlock?
And so it's sort of this, I guess you're right. And I think that one of the core differences between an applied DM and a normal DM is a normal DM failing to tell the story outside of starter forest would consider that a failure. Whereas an applied DM doesn't care. Are the kids hitting their goals? Yeah, then it's a wild success. It is no longer about you telling your story, but you hitting your goals.
You're meeting the players where they're at.
Yeah. And I think it's important to still care about the story and be invested in the story. And I think, personally with my groups, acting like you care about the story, because that provides some incentive for the kids to either engage with it or completely try to derail it.
Absolutely.
Both are good so long as they're working as a group.
Right, as long as they're sort of using the skills that you're trying to foster in that particular environment.
Yeah, so I always act so sad when they one-shot the big bad on their third encounter. But I'm just like, yes, that was awesome teamwork.
You did it. Good job. Well, Peter, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. This has been fun. It's like you said, I haven't really had a chance to talk with somebody about, therapeutic role-playing games. This is like the first time I've gotten a chance to like really go off on it for any long period of time. So this is fun. Before we go, I usually sort of end my episodes with like sort of like positive things or affirmations or just sort of ideas that might be helpful to people at any time. So I wanted to offer you the chance to, do you feel like there's anything that you might want to share with people that might be dealing with something tough right now?
Yeah. It's okay if you need space. You don't need to talk about it. Don't let anyone tell you you need to talk about it. You know, if talking about it will help, then talk about it. But if someone is pressuring you to do something that they think will help you, but is forcing vulnerability, they might be more interested in their own sense of helping you rather than allowing you to heal on your own terms. So I think put a bit more clearly is healing is hard, and when you need help, seek it out, but be aware that healing is your path. And if someone is pushing you to heal in a way that is prying your pain away from you, in a way that is not healing and forcing some vulnerability, it's okay to say, I need space. I need to process this on my own time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Take care, be kind, and have fun adventuring.